And the entirety of this episode is not going to be what airs. So like if you've heard any of my other episodes,
Hmm.
it's very narrative based. But we'll
Yep.
just go through these questions, have ourselves a good time, and then it'll be, I think your episode is coming out in 5 weeks. So
Okay.
I'll get back to you when it airs.
Awesome.
So let's talk about your entrance into sports psychology and how you figured out that that was an area that you wanted to pursue for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So for myself, I I went and took like a gap year between like high school and college, where I kind of went and that was I did like part-time work. I worked part-time and then I also went and kind of took a couple of classes. So I knew I wanted to do something in the realm of like helping people. So that kind of involved, and I also like kind of look back on my life of what I enjoyed doing and kind of what brought pleasure to that, and like it kind of kept coming back of like I'm like I really enjoy listening, like hearing people's stories of what's going on in their lives. So that kind of tailored me to like psychology potentially of kind of understanding that and helping people, and kind of then went into a little bit deeper of like, okay, well, what are fields in that? So that kind of led that exploration, and then kind of got into like saw different counseling realms, and then so some reason like when I mentioned stuff of like love of sports, people kept mentioning like Springfield College. Like I kind of like looked into Springfield College. Didn't end up going there for my undergraduate, but like that ended up being my master's. So like I kind of like and I found like the field of like sports psychology and athletic counseling there. And like I was like, oh, like that's pretty cool in terms of like it be combining like helping people in like a counseling realm and then also like the sports side, which like is a big part of my life. So it kind of like fit really well. So I kind of entered college thinking like that's what I wanted to do. And then a big thing that kind of drove me to it was the summer before my freshman year of college. I tore my labrum in my shoulder because I was a baseball pitcher, which ended up not allowing me to play in college, which kind of had an even bigger impact on like wanting to learn like the mental side because like when you're recovering from an injury, you kind of go and that's when you really notice like the mental side more because something is physically now wrong with you because you had to get surgery and recover from it. So that definitely piqued my interest even more of like wanting to learn more about it. And that was something where all through undergrad, like I was trying to find ways to like get into like a sports psychology realm to like learn more about what you wanted to learn. Um, which led me to like study abroad because like they had like a sports psych course to take. Um, and then that kind of just like piqued the interest even more to then finally like get to my master's of like applied work and finally getting to work with athletes, like learn like in-depth information like how to actually apply it and work with different athletes.
Yeah. So where did you do your study abroad and what were you doing?
I did it in New Zealand. Um, so that was like I said, it went and like they had that as an offering. So like my sophomore year, my undergrad, I debated do I want to transfer and like go into like an undergraduate degree that has like sports psychology offered to like learn more of like what I wanted to like get into. And at the time it was just like possibly that, but like it's the whole process of transferring and what transfers and all that stuff. So like kind of that other option was like, okay, I could study abroad, obviously go to like a very interesting place, um, and like learn about sports psychology and like take like an intro course to it. And ironically, go all the way there. The professor has worked with like the All Blacks rugby team and like is pretty known in the field. And, like I said like, hey, can I meet with you and talk about like master's programs? And like the first one he mentioned was Springfield College, which ironically, like you go 9,000 miles away and to say, oh, like Springfield College, like this program for like athletic counseling, which is about 70 miles from where I live. So it was just like a funny like bring you back to where you originally were from of like this is where you should go for your master's. So
That's like fate.
yeah.
Like you should have just known at that point, this is where I'm going.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. I mean, did you did you have like that gut feeling when he said that? Like the wow, this is coming full circle for me.
Yeah, I think it was just one of those things where like even when I was like like when I kind of mentioned like sports psychology, like obviously I ended up doing the athletic counseling program. But when I mentioned like that field, like coaches and like trainers kept saying like, oh, like have you looked into Springfield, and like have you looked into Springfield? So it kind of just like kept coming up as a like, okay, like obviously like this is something to take, like a place to take seriously, to, like if that's what you want to get into. And I also knew I wanted to stay in the Northeast, like that also fit into the realm of kind of what you were looking for in a program. And I mean, the program itself, like I kind of said like there wasn't anything that like I was promised in the program that like didn't happen, which is kind of cool. Like normally like you get built up of like a lot of stuff, and like maybe 50% of it happens. But like in this case, like it actually like there wasn't any fluff of, hey, like you're gonna get this, and like that didn't happen because of whatever it was, which was actually like reassuring and like exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want out of a program, right? You
Yeah.
want all of your dreams to come true and everything that they promise you to come to fruition.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the director, like Judy Van Ralt, like that went and like before getting accepted, like it was, I did like she was like, oh, come to like what they called research team. And like it was over the summer, so not many people were there, but it ended up being like 2+ hours of my dad and I just like asking her and like a couple of students like all the questions I had, which like doesn't like, that just shows the care that you're not even a student of hers yet, and like took 2 hours of her time to like just answer all your questions, like the director of it, which doesn't like that's not usual, I would say, for many programs. So
Yeah. I mean, that she sat down with you
yeah.
and you just got to pick her brain. That's really awesome. So what's the eventual goal for you?
I don't know, I think I have a lot of like ambition of different things I want to do. I think um it's kind of gone from like your first year in your master's of like, wow, like whether it's athletic counseling, like the mental side of sport is like super interesting, and like it's like you're all on like that high. Like I went to like ASP like for the first time in Toronto, and like after that you're on like that like mental skills, mental performance high of like, oh my God, this is awesome, type of thing. And then you kind of went and like did it, and then that summer like I did, like I coached baseball, which was like a lot of fun in terms of like a travel team where you're the head coach and like you implemented some of those skills. And I was like, oh, like maybe coaching is what I want to do, because like it allows you to combine your skills of like the mental side and also like your coaching style of like building those relationships, where if you're like a, whether there's mental performance or sport, like whatever you want to call it, like that relationship kind of could be a lot different because of how you have to handle confidentiality and all that stuff. So it's like, okay, like I think coaching might be what I want to do. So that was kind of like the thought. And then also over that summer, I got like my personal training certification because like exercise and lifting was something I'm really interested in and wanted to learn more about. So you kind of had like these three realms of like the mental side, the technical side, and the physical side that you're like, I want to find a way to like combine all three of those in some variation. And did my last year, tried to get into a couple of things in terms of like coaching and also training. Pandemic hit, so those kind of went by the wayside. And then connected with an old coach who like kind of said like, hey, like if you're into the training side, like you have to get in with this place called like Advanced Therapy and Performance, which is like the shirt I'm wearing now. And he's like, do like their internship and like get to know. So like that's a place down in Stamford, Connecticut, that like they train like almost exclusively like baseball players, for like a lifting perspective. And got in contact with them, and like they do a lot of remote online programming as well. Uh, and like when I got there, like just like I did like their internship as like a strength coach, and like loved the place in terms of super supportive, like a lot of things you learn and like a mental performance like master's degree of like, hey, like this is how you coach, or like ways to interact with athletes, like it's being done, like there's a genuine care for who they work with. And they typically work like high school level to like professional level of athletes. So like it kind of meshed that, okay, here's like the training side and the baseball side, which was cool. And I definitely, like when the internship was coming to an end, like they kind of said like, we never actively look to hire people, but like if you have something that we don't have and would like we'll like find a way to do it. So like I kind of went and pitched the idea of like doing mental performance skills, because like that's something they didn't have, and like a way to like stay with them, because like I just loved the environment where they were. So now that's kind of where I'm at. So at the moment, it's combining kind of all three things. So you're still like on the floor, like interacting with the athletes. It's baseball oriented. So you're getting like to learn about the lifting side, the technical side of playing, and then now like I'm the mental performance coach for their company. So it kind of combines those like three areas that you're like looking for. So like that's where I'm at now, and like trying to build that job essentially, because it is new. So trying to convince like athletes like the importance of the mental side, and even just learning about yourself of like starting your own practice and all of that stuff has been a lot of work.
So what was the process of convincing these people that wanted you to work for them that you should have your own department, you should be doing your own thing, and kind of
Yeah,
reinventing their
I
offerings?
yeah, I think it definitely it takes a lot of time. Like that's something I've been saying a lot is like development takes time, and it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen most of the times. Just because it was like pitching the idea. So like luckily like where I'm at, like the like my boss who's like in the location kind of like knows the importance of it essentially. Like he will go and like will do different things for like mindset and like meditations and like all of that, and like, he's very in tune with it, so knows the importance of it. So now it was kind of how to then bring that to like a company wide thing, and we're still learning like how to do it and how to like best implement it. um so that's where I think the convincing of like the importance of it wasn't the difficult part. It was now, okay, what are the parameters of what you would do? How can like you help? So like it went through like writing your own job descriptions, which was like a weird thing to try and do, showing like mock like what a mock session would look like, what a mock workshop would look like. Um, and then based off that kind of pitching it to them of like what that would look like. And it's still, like I said, an ongoing thing of like what's your role, how can like you help the athletes, how can you help the trainers and coaches, in like that sense. So I think we're getting to a point now where there's a much better understanding. Like if I say like that's taken months to get of like, okay, who should we like we refer to you in terms of like to get a session, like what are you going to be doing with them, how is it different than just like us talking to the athletes. So it's kind of been a pretty, like I said, long process where now I'm just starting to see like the some results of like getting consistent sessions with athletes and having them come in and like wanting to work on the skills and kind of being known as like, okay, like you had to transition from your Matt, like the intern who's helping me strength train, to now a whole position change of like you're now the mental performance coach. So that also took time because you would still have athletes when you're on the floor just like observing and like building relationship and rapport with them. They would say like, oh, like how do I do this exercise, or like what is this exercise, what's the warm up, which like you would know, but at the same time like you're wanting to try and separate yourself a little bit from that because now like you're in a new role. So like, obviously you would go still go if someone's like doing a set and like they need someone to like spot them or whatever it is, like you'll go help that and like be a resource to help, where you're trying to kind of separate yourself a little bit from like the physical side of being a coach to now like you're the mental performance coach.
Yeah, I mean, you've made yourself very versatile.
Yeah.
So walk us through what a session looks like, what a workshop looks like. I mean, are you
Um,
working with individuals or are you working with team environments?
Mostly individuals right now. They're actually hopefully in the next like they have a place and like it's like they're currently sharing location, but within the next couple of months they're going to be opening their own facility. Um, like ATP is. So once that's open, the goal is to start doing like workshops and like bigger things. So at the moment, haven't done any workshops. Right now, it's more individual sessions. So with individual sessions, I've been doing a like free like 30-minute eval and kind of just like an understanding of what I do. So I'll go through the informed consent where I kind of lay out what my role is and what we'd be trying to attempt to do. And in that, I really try and like show them like this isn't a there's something wrong with you type of mentality. Like this is to like improve, and like everyone can work on this no matter who you are. Like I'm still working on it. Like everyone can benefit from it because kind of say like everything we do in life's a performance. So, like mental performance skills translates to everything kind of that goes on. So I'm kind of trying to pitch that as like a hey, like this is something to work on. and I just compare it to like the physical side of like if there's something physically wrong, like something bothering you or injured, that's not mean there's something wrong with your body. It's just something happened. So it's the same thing with the mental side of like these are skills to keep improving upon. So the way I say it is like if your hamstring's tight, you stretch it and work on it to improve it. So it's the same thing with the mental side. If you're having like a lot of stress, you could go and work on these skills to reduce your stress, and it's something to work on. So I go through that, and especially if like they're under 18, like explain to the parents what it is because they're the ones who have to sign off to do the sessions. Um, and after I'll answer any questions they have, and then kind of go through all of that, and then I'll take them through a it's like the psychological coping skills inventory. Which I'll go through that because I really liked that one because it kind of goes through like 7 different skills. It's only 28 questions, and for the most part, is like I think does a good job of kind of going and like getting a general understanding because it goes from things of worrying to pressure to coachability to setting goals. Like it kind of has a pretty wide range of skills. So I thought that's like a good one to do that's not too long that they can go through. And I always ask if they end up doing sessions with me, like I show them the results of it. And for the most part, they're like, yeah, I agree pretty well with what it came out with.
Great.
And then yeah, and then in the initial, I also do like a pre-questionnaire inventory, just to like see and track progress. So I kind of go and have a list of like 10 mental skills, and I say, okay, like rate your knowledge about this skill from like 1 to 10, and then also your ability to like implement that skill from 1 to 10. And like go through those, then see where they are, and then I end that free like initial session by just asking like if you decide to work with me, like what are some areas that you want to work on going forward, or like what ideas popped in your head while going through this inventory and questionnaire that like potentially interests you to work on. And that's kind of how I'll lead the beginning like intro session.
Yeah. Do you ever have athletes who come in and point you directly to where you need to start, or do you normally have to go through the inventory and do the questionnaire? And if so,
Yeah.
what is that skill that most, I guess, youth athletes are so self-aware?
Yeah, I think some of them have an idea of what they want to work on. It's now um especially like at that level, it's thinking like, oh, like you're here to like potentially solve the problem for me, or like tell me like a quick fix of like I want to like work on like performing under pressure, and like they think like it's like you're gonna have some answers for me of how to do that. So I think it kind of that could be what they say they want to work on in the long run in terms of like when I ask what they want to work on. But then I think it's that first session where like I just ask them like I need to like what are your experiences with pressure? How do you handle it now? Kind of getting that background from them, because if I just say, okay, you're dealing with pressure, like if I just associate pressure with like being tense, being nervous, like thoughts racing, and just say, okay, do these 5 things and go, like most likely they're not going to feel help. They're going to feel like, okay, like I didn't really get much out of it, and most likely not even try those skills or like methods that I say. So the big thing is like trying to go and like get a full understanding of like what they're going through. So like they might have skills they use currently that they're not even aware of. So like by bringing that awareness to them is like a lot of what the like first session in terms of like that hour session is just getting an understanding of the athlete of, okay, like what situations make you feel like pressure, for example, or what do you go through to then try and counteract that pressure? Is it a certain situation, or is it just all the time? That I try and get like a well-rounded understanding. And then, okay, what skills do you use yourself that you found that like do work or don't work? Because if they have past skills that have worked in the past or in other areas, then like that's a way to connect that for them without actually telling them what to do, but more like they're figuring out for themselves through guided questions. And that's typically how it starts. So I think a lot of them have that I want to work on this, but don't realize the extent of what that will take.
Do they ever come in and say, my coach worked on this with me? So, I mean, do you have any coach input, or is it mostly from parents?
Um, I would say not much coach input of like what they have to work on. I think it's mostly from the athlete, which I think is beneficial. Just like I always say, obviously if they're under 18, like you tell the parents like they do have a right to like know what's going on in sessions and all of that. But I think it's good to get it from the athlete's perspective, just because then it's fully from their perspective. Where like if it's from a coach, like they could they can know what's going on, but like if it's the coach saying, hey, really work on this with this athlete, then like the athlete might be like, well, like he's not doing this because he got to know me, like meaning like me not knowing what they're going through. But if I can understand it from their perspective, that's going to help even more. And it might take longer to then get to the same thing the coach said, but I'm understanding it from the athlete's perspective rather than the coach's like external like viewing of the athlete's perspective.
Right. Is there a favorite kind of person that you work with? So, like, you said that you work with a lot of youth athletes, but is there a specific sport or a gender that you feel like you really have a connection with, or they really understand quickly what you're trying to teach them?
Um, I
And
don't
it's
know if
totally
I've
okay
yeah.
if that's a no.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite yet. I think working with different things like currently I'm like since it's like working with just like baseball, like that's predominantly like all males at the moment of who I'm working with, uh, in terms of from where I'm at. So that kind of limits the thing of like if there's a gender that I prefer working with. But I think that it depends on what it is. Like so with counseling, I found like there's pros and cons of working with sports you know and sports you don't. Like if you don't know the sport, you then get to see and learn about that athlete's experience completely from their perspective, which is kind of a cool, like unbiased way of seeing it. So if someone like for something like wrestling, like I don't know the scoring rules, I don't know like much about it. So when an athlete's talking and I might have to stop them 4 or 5 times to explain a different move or scoring system, that builds more rapport, shows interest in what they're talking about. And I'm not just assuming that I know. Where if it is something like baseball, someone might say like, oh, like I'm having a lot of difficulty like locating my fastball. And like I might think like, oh, like I already know what that is because I played the sport. Like it almost you have to like have those check-ins or like self-awareness of like, no, like you might know for yourself what that was like, but this is a different person who has a whole different experience from you. So it kind of is having that awareness of what it is. And then there's also times where having that knowledge also helps. Like working with a high school athlete was going and like had like that feeling of like having to be perfect and having to like do it all on his own, and like thinking that these like different games have different meanings. And I kind of just gave some baseball examples of like, oh, like tell me a pitcher that has gone and like struck out every batter in a game type of thing, and like it hasn't happened type of thing. Like out of the 27 outs, like if there's been barely any pitchers that have gotten 20 strikeouts in a game, like it rarely happens. And like that's considered oh my god, like an oh my god performance. So like if you're in high school and expecting that, and like these are professionals that are at the top of their game, like how can you hold yourself to that standard that's like not realistic? So like stuff like that is like ways to get through of having that background knowledge, um which can really help. But it's also being aware and like having those checkpoints of like, no, I don't think that you just because you might have experienced the same thing that you know what they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that baseball is one of the worst sports for perfectionists because
Yeah.
if you fail 60% of the time, you're still an insane player.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's an aspect of baseball specifically that I just think is so unique to the mental game.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask you, you were talking about how unbiased it felt to work with a sport that you've never played. But when you're working with a sport like baseball, do you include anecdotes or do you kind of try to minimize those experiences so that you don't influence the athlete's perspective or their potential answer?
um I would say that I might not use like anecdotes from like your cliche anecdotes of baseball. I would say if I think it pertains to like help them understand better or put like their thought, like in like the case I just said, like that's kind of like a perfectionist, like irrational thinking of like I have to strike everyone out. Then by doing that, like by then potentially putting in like a real world example from like the professional level could help them be like almost get that realization of hey, like this really isn't a realistic goal that I have or like thought that I need to do. So like that's where I think it's helpful because it puts in perspective. And you saw it like when I kind of said that, and then like they thought about it, there was like almost that like light bulb of like that like smile of like, huh, like that actually makes kind of some sense. Where if I just tried to convince them like, well, why do you have to strike everyone out, or say, how has that been working for you, and try and get deeper and deeper into it, it could be potentially difficult because like you're not like guiding them into a direction. You're just kind of having them rethink about it and kind of question stuff, which is helpful. But in the same sense, by showing them examples of it, it can kind of allow them to see it for themselves potentially a little bit quicker, I would say.
Yeah. And then you're talking a lot about counseling and working from the applied side. So, how did Springfield and your experience there transition your perspective surrounding sports psychology? I mean, did you ever want to do anything that was not counseling related?
I think Springfield definitely like gave you all the opportunities to work in like a variety of different teams and sports. Like we go there and like you get to go and like what we call draft day, and like let's say like all like the people that are like the second years in the program who are like the heads of the teams for like the athletic counselors um come in and like kind of say, this is the team that I'm like running like the head counselor for. um if you want like a little bit about the team, what they do, and then if you want to sign up for it, like sign up for it. And that's why it was like draft day essentially. um and then being able to go and like sign up for them, and then you would go and typically get like 4 or 5 teams that you would work with. Not You wouldn't get all the ones you signed up for, but also like they would try and guarantee you get like 2 or 3 of the ones that you wanted to work with. So like that kind of gave you the opportunity to work with different teams at Springfield. And then also like I had the experience of like working at like a local gym that someone like in the program worked at as like a other experience. And then if you want to be able to like say like, hey, I do this that kind of can apply, like you can then present it to Dr. Van Rol and go to say like, hey, this is a good fieldwork opportunity to get hours. So like for myself, like I did a summer camp called like Skyhawks, which like their main motto is like life skills through sports type of thing. So like each day you have like a different life skill, like well each week, because like each week you would do a different group, but like the same life skills that you would go over. So like that turned into an opportunity to like get hours and like still work in sports and like teach skills. But yeah, so you got to work with different teams, which was awesome, in different locations. And like that was a variety of doing like your one-on-one sessions with athletes, in terms of counseling sessions. And then you also got the opportunity to do like different experiential workshops. So like if you went and did that, which like that's something that's very fun to do, like facilitating a workshop and like seeing that is really exciting. So I think it gave you those two sides really well, of the applied part of working in like performance, like mental performance skills, because you got to do the one-on-one, but you also got the group aspect of like seeing it done hands-on and like people growing and like asking questions. And then being able to make those programs are super interesting because like it's like finding ways to make it hands-on and like that like aha moment, and then how to wrap it up at the end to really get like the take home of what they're looking for, and like also learn yourself because you might have a complete like different idea of like what the outcome would be. So if you give them that room to say what they learned from it, it might be completely different what you expected, which then opens up a whole new realm of possibility of learning of what like kind of you just did.
Yeah. Do you ever have that aha moment with an athlete while they're in a session where you tell them to do something and it may be just like an offhand, hey, this may help. And then they come back next session and they're like, wow, this really worked. And it may have been something that you wanted to put pressure on, or it may not have been. It may have just been a little offhand comment that they implemented and found it really useful.
Yeah, there's been a couple where they kind of come and say like, wow, like that was really help, like that last session like was really helpful. I did some of the stuff we talked about, because I tend to try and at the end of sessions, like really like the last 10 minutes, ask like, okay, like what was their understanding of the session? What were the takeaways that they had, to kind of reinforce what they got from the sessions. And then also I tend to try and have a couple of like small tasks to have them do in between sessions. And it doesn't have to be anything super long. A lot of it is like gaining that awareness. Like if you are going and like you find that like for baseball, there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of time that you're just standing around. So like it might be like in between innings that you're going, and like you find that your mind starts racing. So like, okay, like through this next week or however long until we meet again, start like recording what those thoughts are. When do they happen? What occurs with them? How do you stop them? To kind of get that awareness. It's like a like, not, you call it like homework, but like kind of like thing to do in between the sessions to then learn from it. So it's not just it's happening, I don't know what to do about it. Like, that's the big thing, is gaining that awareness of when it starts. So it's trying, like, that's how I kind of go in between sessions, of like make sure they had a big takeaway, like, or not big takeaway, but like takeaways from it of what they thought of it. So that's like at least some reflection, and then reactions of like how the session go for them. And then also those things like takeaways then apply for themselves is how I tend to do it. And there's been a couple of times where some of them say like just being able to talk and like get these ideas out, and like the questions you asked kind of gets me thinking, and like I haven't thought of it that way, or just expressing it with someone who's not going to like judge what I'm saying or have a bias about it has really been helpful. And some people say like gaining that awareness that like I've done, and then I tried a couple of the skills we tried, and like they were really helpful, and like I found myself performing better. So you've definitely had those where it's like someone's gone like the next session, like the first 10 or 15 minutes saying like how like great the experience was, like even after a session, which is like kind of surprising and not expected.
Especially because you're so new to this field. I mean,
Yeah.
that's almost like we're pushing aside the idea of delayed gratification, because they're telling you, even after the session is done, while they're still there with you, hey, this worked.
Yeah, so I think that's the big piece of it, of just that was the big like takeaway I was trying to get, is like how can you get them not to just think like, okay, like I need one session and I'm done, I'm fit, like I'm better, I'm done with it, like type of thing. Like how can I get that to keep going, and also like have it be where I don't want to reinforce like after a session it's going to be all better and like we're going to figure everything out and like it's going to be solved. But I also don't want them to walk away with the, I just talked a lot for an hour and I don't really know what happened or what helped me. So I don't know if I want like a second session, if it's really worth it. So it's been trying to find that balance of making sure I get a good understanding of what they're going through and what they want to work on, with also having them get some takeaways from the session to want to be able to come back and continue to work. Because as I said, like it is kind of a lifelong like process of being able to control your mindset in a lot of different realms. So I think that's kind of the balance I've been trying to find, of getting a good understanding and then also having them have takeaways from that first session.
So, how many sessions do you normally do with an athlete?
um it all varies. Like you kind of preface it as, in the beginning, since you're trying to start something new, like the big question, especially from parents, is like how many sessions do you think you need, or how many like do you think are most effective? And I still don't have an answer for that, just because it is so new. And like I said, like yes, like I've been like the mental performance coach for like a couple of months with them, as well as like talking about it for like even more. So like now you're starting to get those consistent like weekly sessions, which has been like super encouraging. But the way I've kind of said it to parents is just like there isn't like a, okay, have 5 sessions and like everything is going to be fixed. I try and preface it just as I like to go and start with at least like 2 or 3 sessions, like for 2 or 3 weeks, to then go and get like a good understanding of what's going on, like with like your child at this moment, like the athlete. And then like throughout those times, working on a couple of different skills to then see what could be most effective and like what works and what doesn't work. And then after those, maybe you go and take 2 or 3 weeks not having a session, trying to implement what we talked about, and then almost having like check-ins after, of like, hey, like say like these breathing techniques were really helpful, but like I really didn't like having to go and trying to be positive with like self-talk or something like that. And like then come in and do like a check-in, say like, okay, like now like we know a method that works, let's tailor more things to that, to then kind of see what works and going forward. So that's how I've tried to preface the number of sessions questions. It's not like it's hard to say like, oh, like it's going to be 5 sessions and like everything is going to be better, because in those sessions, something might come up that they didn't even realize. Some sessions, like someone might need like a minor thing that they want to work on, and like, hey, this worked for me. Like I'm all set now. Like it really varies. So that's the best answer I can give to parents, just because it is so variable of how long it might take, and then how I also preface like it isn't just like you do a session and then you just go session by session without doing anything. I say it's the same thing if you do like lessons with a private instructor. Like you can't expect to do like a hitting lesson on like a Friday and then go and do nothing for it, and then next Friday have another lesson and expect progress to happen. Like it's the same thing with mental skills of like to get the most out of it, it's going to be practicing it in between those sessions to then have the best overall outcome that you're able to have, because it's the same thing. Like if you're not working on it, it's not going to improve.
Right. It's like rehabbing. I mean, if
Yeah,
you go 2 weeks between rehab sessions for like a broken ankle, your ankle's
yeah,
not going to heal.
exactly.
It's the same thing. So, how do you go about teaching these youth athletes who may or may not be self-aware of the sports like skills that they're already actively using? How do
hmm
you go about introducing those skills to those youth players?
I think the big thing is kind of like I said, what takes time is like building that relationship and like that rapport with them. So it could be like you're on the floor while they're lifting and noticing like different trends or different things that are going on. And that could be like noticing it and just asking them how they're doing. And rather than going like trying to jump on that right away of like, oh, like I think you should book a session with me. It's almost like seeing like, okay, is this a trend that is like reoccurring? So if it's like being tired a lot or like being down or whatever that is, like kind of noticing it multiple occasions, and it might be like 3 weeks from that initial like thing where you've seen them now 5 or 6 times in those 3 weeks, and be like, okay, like, this is a trend. And like in that time, each time you approach them, talk to them, see what's going on to get like a decent understanding, even if it is only like a 2 minute conversation. And then after that, you kind of have that rapport because like you've been talking to them for like 2 or 3 weeks or even longer, and then going and saying like, hey, like based off what we've talked about over a while, like I think it could be beneficial to kind of like set up a session and kind of explore some of the things we've talked about in greater depth, rather than like while you're trying to do a workout for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, as a way to continue looking at it and then improve on these things and kind of learn some skills or gain some skills that you might not be aware of that could help you in these situations.
Do you ever go to the team that they're playing on and watch a game and see if they're implementing any of the skills that you're trying to teach them? I know that mental skills do not make themselves particularly apparent, but
Yeah,
you ever go and watch the athletes that you work with in their natural habitat while they're performing?
I'd like to. I think it all like COVID makes it a little tricky because like now is like this like their season typically. So like I said, like I
Let's talk hypothetically after COVID.
yeah. Yeah, no, like I would love to like be able to see it. Especially like with the high schoolers. I know like they're like most high schools, at least in Connecticut, are starting like beginning of April or like that first or second week of April. So like their seasons haven't started yet. Which has also been another like attempting to like get people in for sessions to like learn more about it of like, hey, like you have 2 or 3 weeks before your high school season starts. Like let's get like really proactive and like learn some skills before the season starts, so we have like a really proactive approach rather than like reactive. Like it's going to be really difficult, say like something does happen mid-season on the field, and then like you come to me saying, hey, I really like under pressure, like had a lot of trouble, like was really thinking negatively, and then it's in season to be like, okay, like now it now really is a fix this type of thing rather than a, hey, like let's learn some things to do. So like that's an approach I've been trying to have of let's be proactive and use some of this stuff now so then you can have it going into your season rather than like trying to implement it mid-season. But
Right.
yeah, I would love to be able to go and see kind of their games and how they interact, because that's also how you would get the most out of it. It's like you would able to be able to see them perform and like what kind of happens, and that could gain or help them raise even more awareness of what's going on, because like they might be doing it and not notice it, but like you're able to visually see it, and kind of be around it. So I think that could be definitely super helpful to do. Um, hopefully if like hopefully with everything like as seasons start going and progressing and people are allowed to go to games.
Yeah, I mean that kind of throws a wrench in the whole consulting
Yeah.
environment. I mean, are you doing anything over Zoom, or are you just limiting your ability to work face to face with athletes?
Right now, due to like space constraints of where they're located, my sessions are all through Zoom right now in terms of like one-on-ones. Once they get like the facility and all of that, like then there'll be more in person and then like workshops will start. So like right now, all of them are through Zoom, which makes it helpful, especially for athletes, because like right now, like with like your college guys are back at college playing, like professional guys, most of them are back like for spring training and all that. So like right now it is like majority high school players. And like they have school, they have practice, and then it's like I can do a session at 8 o'clock at night. So it actually makes it a lot more accessible for them to do it through Zoom, just because you're able to go and like, okay, like I wouldn't go and drive like 30, 40 minutes down to Stanford from where I'm from to do like an hour session type of thing, and then risk like the place like with it being open and also just like then an hour back. So like that Zoom has allowed it to be, hey, like I'm home, and also for them the travel of having to like I just went to school to practice to homework and all that. Like now I have to travel to wherever to meet. It kind of gives them like, okay, I'm home, I could do it now. So and it also allows you to then work with people that you might not even know based off of like referrals, or if it's like I said, like ATP does have like a very big like a lot of like free resources online and like online following and a lot of online training platforms. So then it's like those people also could also you can also like provide services to them in different areas, not just the ones that you see physically at the facility.
So, do you see the athletes that you're working with over Zoom being more comfortable now that they're in, for example, their bedroom talking to you as opposed to in the facility, or is that not really something that you've seen happening?
I couldn't say fully because I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them in person in a session, like at the facility. So I can't speak to how, like, if there is a difference. I think Zoom, they're definitely more comfortable because you see a lot of them, like, they're on their bed or they're just like kind of there. So I think they might feel more comfortable. And also, it's probably a lot more private in a sense because, like, they're in their own environment of like being at home in their room talking rather than like in a facility with like friends or other people like doing a lift or getting like something like throwing in. So it probably provides them, I would have to guess, like a little bit more comfort and probably better concentrated on like what's actually going on in the session because they're just doing a session, not seeing all these external things that are around them.
So, at Springfield, what teams did you work with?
I did the football team, the soccer team,
Which soccer team?
uh, what? Oh,
Which
men's
soccer
soccer
team?
team.
Okay.
The men's soccer team, sorry. And then I did the wrestling team for like the first year. And then for 2 years, it's what we call CIRC, so it's like the Sport Injury Rehab Center. Um, so we abbreviated it to CIRC as like the site, but they go and have like their senior athletic trainers working with the injured athletes. So as counselors, like, we were able to be in that room, um, working with those like with the athletic trainers and the athletes as like kind of like that like triad of like working in terms of like helping them recover from the physical and mental side. And then my second year when I was there, I was like the point person or like the head counselor, I guess you could say, for like that, where you would interact with like the head athletic trainer of like the program and all that, and kind of coordinate the meetings, who was going to be with what athlete, and kind of like that point of like going through between like how's it going and like evaluating everything. So like you were the middleman essentially between like the head of your program and the head of their program, and then how it comes together in the actual training room. So like that was a cool experience of like seeing a different side of sport, which is rehabbing of it, which we said like is a very mental comeback, not just physical. And then my second year, I also worked at the gym that like another athletic counselor worked at. And I was like one of the counselors for that gym, working with them. So those are the teams that I mainly worked with.
Yeah, that seems like a lot to manage on top of getting a master's degree. Did you
Mm.
ever feel overwhelmed?
There were periods of it. I think each team you do different amounts. So like the football team at Springfield is one of those teams that's like really bought into like the mental side. So your main role was like doing the freshman study halls where like you'd be like the facilitator of it, and like each week we would do mental skills workshops with them. So the coach would give a list of different skills that he wanted to work on, and kind of collaborate with those point people of like what we could do. So each like Monday you would go at night and like put on like a 30 to 40 minute workshop on like communication, money management, leadership, different things like that for the athletes to engage in and learn about rather than just like sitting around. Like if there was like a lot of homework, we would tell them in ahead of time, like, hey, like remember Monday for about 30 or 40 minutes of the hour and a half study hall, like we're going to be doing a workshop. So plan for like that time to be doing a workshop. And then the rest of the time would be doing homework or whatever they had to get done. So like that was a definitely a cool experience, like see how like what you think and how you can make mental skills like a physical tool for them to be able to see how their thinking impacts their actions and like the consequences of those,
Yeah,
or the
that's
yeah, or
really
the outcomes. Yeah.
yeah. That's really cool that you had direct work with the students at your university.
Mm.
Like that they trusted you with their athletes.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a big
Was that a
thing.
lot of pressure?
um in the moment I didn't really think of it as like pressure. um it was just like it was just fun to do. Like I thought of it more as like exciting because like you're getting to know the athletes, you're getting to go and kind of like see them learn, and then you're also learning at the same point. So like you really make it, um like it would be difficult to think like, oh, like I can really like mess this athlete up or like screw something up, because like there wasn't really like a way, like you weren't like, you still like I still can't, but you're not diagnosing them, you're not saying like, oh, you have this. It was just you're listening, and that was like the big thing at the start. Like within the first 2 weeks of being in your masters, like you have a caseload, you're meeting with athletes, you're doing this stuff. So like it really is like a, just not just, but like just go and like listen and like see what they're going through. And from that, ask questions to kind of keep digging deeper. So you're kind of thrown into the fire of like, okay, like with limited amount of knowledge, start counseling these athletes or start doing workshops. So it was a learn by doing really of, hey, I encountered this, and you would go into like what they called field work, where you would be with like the head of the program and like another 7 or 8 people in your cohort to like ask like, hey, I was working with this athlete and I encountered this experience. Like, how do we think I could have done better? Like, what could I have done differently? And all of that, and like get in like a nice like round table answer of like, okay, next session, this is what I'm gonna try and do and see how it goes, and then report back of how it went. So everyone's experience became a learning experience in what you were doing, which was a cool way of doing it.
Yeah. I like that the discussion based learning style. I think that that's really cool. And the fact that you're actually bringing your own experiences to the table. I mean,
Yeah.
was that a good way to learn? Like, did you learn well in that way? Or was there another way that you saw was more helpful to your learning style?
I think it was helpful doing it. I think especially when you're working with people like at that time, especially early on, because once again, like you haven't learned a lot of stuff in terms of like academic of like mental performance skills techniques. So like you were asking questions. So like at the time, like people think listening, asking questions and all that is like easy, but you don't realize how hard it is to continue a conversation where you're not the one giving advice or talking a lot, but listening, not trying to think of, not trying to like in the moment of, okay, like what if this session ends, like I have nothing else to say, what if there's silent, like all those things, like what if there's silence, like that awkward moment. So it's kind of like learning in the moment of what to do, and then being able to bring those experiences in really helped. Where if it was just, let's run some hypotheticals and what did you learn from them, it's not as effective or as meaningful because it's a hypothetical. You didn't actually go through it. Where when you're in the fire, going and doing it, it allows you to be like, oh, like actually, like this is something I have a question on, or like this actually happens. And then most likely you're not the only one that happened to, because you're all learning and doing it at the same time at the same level.
And then outside of obviously your classwork, what kind of other mediums do you consume that are sports psych or counseling related? I mean, are there books that you're reading? Are there podcasts? Are there documentaries? I mean, how are you consuming your material?
Yeah, I think in like actually in my master's, it was much more like the textbooks that they had for us, in terms of what that class was doing. And then being out of school, I think a lot of it has now turned to, like, for myself, like I have a 30 to 45-minute commute to go to Stanford every day, like one way. So that kind of like, it kind of got to the point where it's like, okay, like just music isn't enough to like get you down there. So like then I really started to get into podcasts of like different ones, to listen to and kind of like fill out time to learn while you're going down. And it also like kind of the way like the way a lot of ones, especially for like mental skills or sports psychology, do, like they end up leaving you kind of like feeling excited about it, or like in a much better mindset or like headspace, because like it's about how to improve your mindset, like different things, or you're hearing an expert talk about what they did with an athlete. So it just further enhances and increases your knowledge of the field, and also it gives you the most up to date knowledge, because like these are experts that have like they're currently doing it, they're currently working on it and applying it and seeing what works and what doesn't. And that's where you pull different like one liners or like different techniques that could work that you might not read about in a textbook, but more like this is in the like field of what they're currently doing. And then also there's been a lot of different books kind of that, I've read, that definitely have been interesting and kind of been used in different sessions, as well as kind of like that's a cool topic or a cool way it was framed that has definitely expanded my knowledge or like learning.
So, what podcasts are those?
Um, I think the one that,
Name drop a couple.
yeah, I think it's like I think it's Master Your Mindset is one. It's like Colin something, I forgot. I think it's Master Your Mindset. And like that one's cool just because it kind of goes in, dives into the different things. Um, and I feel like I've looked up his name online a little bit. I feel like he's like pretty well known. Um, I've listened to like Taylor's of like Mental Dive podcast, which I've enjoyed a lot in terms of listening to those.
Yeah,
And then like,
Taylor has some good stuff on his.
yeah, so like those have been fun to listen to. Like I just recently like talked to him, and like through Zoom, just like a conversation, and like that prompted me, same thing with like Joe saying like, hey, I'll connect you to Taylor. So like once he connected me to Taylor, like I went and like listened to like 4 or 5 of his before talking to him, which was great. I listened to like Eric Cressy's because he's more on like the lifting side. Um, I think it's like Elite Player Development Podcast, I believe. But his is like definitely interesting to like learn more from the physical side, and like he'll bring in like doctors and like different people of like shoulder and elbow surgeries, or like the lifting stuff of sprinting and like all that stuff. So it's like a different dynamic that I enjoy. He's also had some mental performance coaches, from like Lauren Johnson, who was like formerly worked with the Yankees, was on it. I'm pretty sure Hannah Hughesman was on it from the Phillies. I
Yeah,
think she was on it, or it might have been, she was on either that or the Master Your Mindset podcast. I can't remember which one. So like they do incorporate that, which is cool to kind of see like coming full circle.
yeah. And then I always ask everyone that comes on my podcast, what are you currently reading and does it pertain to the work that you do?
Currently, I'm reading a book that's called, my boss actually gave it to me as a Christmas gift, but I'm currently reading, it's called like Permission to Feel. Um, and I'm only like a chapter or two into it, so I can't say exactly how it is so far. I think the beginning couple of chapters were on, just kind of explaining like the importance of your like emotional intelligence, as like the importance of knowing that stuff. So I am just about to start the chapters that explain like how to become more emotionally intelligent. So I'm not too far into it of like tactics or techniques that have been that like people can apply or use. So like I kind of got into like the buildup of like why it's important and like an outline of the techniques, but not like the deep dive into it of what to do for it. So it's
Yeah.
something that I'm going to continue to read and kind of see, because that's something that's definitely interesting, um, of like how much like emotions play a role. Uh, for a book that I guess I read like last summer, I think, or like last fall, that like I've actually found a lot of application in is like It Takes What It Takes from Trevor Moed. I hope I said his last name correctly. Um, but it's like It Takes What It Takes is a book that I read, and it's all about like neutral thinking of like how you think about situations. Um, which ironically has been something that with a lot of athletes they've found to be helpful, because they talk about like a lot of them you find are like have negative thoughts or negative self-talk, and like his whole book is like from Russ like a perspective of like Russell Wilson, this quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, um, of like his path to like neutral thinking, along with a lot of other examples. Like he's worked with so many different high caliber college football teams and like professionals. um but it kind of just goes through the thought of like, obviously we know like negative self-talk and negative thinking could be super detrimental, but for some people, and like for some like a lot of people, like being positive can also be like draining and exhausting and hard to do. So he takes the perspective of like being neutral and like having neutral statements to kind of get you back into like a neutral mindset, rather than having to be positive all the time. It's like an easier way to get out of your negative mindset. So that's one that I've actually found in the last like couple sessions that I've done and like working with people, of like introducing that of like a neutral mindset. And people have seemed to enjoy it and kind of like that way of doing it. And then it's also cool when like they come back the next session, and we kind of like look through like situations they're going through, and like I'll have them run through like what's like the best case scenario, or like I'll start with worst case scenario to like have it end positive. But like worst case scenario, um, like that most likely or like neutral scenario, or like the best case scenario. And a lot of times like when I use that language, like they'll come back the next session and be like, oh, like I really had like a neutral response, or like I use like neutral thinking, like without me prompting them. So it's kind of cool to see like they're taking away, like that's like a key takeaway they have in some sessions, is like neutral thinking.
Wow. So let's move on a little bit. We talked about the positives and negatives of quote mental toughness and
Hmm.
how the term can be misconstrued. Do you want to talk about your perspective on that and your opinion?
Yeah, I I think I've said like I don't know what word replaces mental toughness, or what direction to go in for it. Like I would have to do more research of like what would be, but I think the way I see it used is like it's like a blanket term to understand, like people thinking they understand the mental side of thinking that person is mentally tough, or they do a difficult task and that makes them mentally tough, without knowing all that encompasses what it takes to be mentally tough. In terms of like, I think Justin Sua had like a recent thing that was posted of like an article of like his thing of mental toughness, and it's not being like what you think of tough, of like rigid and like strict and like all that stuff. It's like being adaptable, being able to go and like adapt to situations, do different things and react to different things in a lot of different ways. It's not being like set in your ways or like being super strong. It's almost like not the opposite, but like being able to go and do a lot of different skills, whether that is breathing or being less tense, or it is going and having neutral or positive thoughts, or being able to imagine certain things or adapt to a situation that you encounter. So I think that's where it gets used as a term, that to try and know the importance of the mental side, but not be fully able to explain what it takes to be mentally tough. So I
It's
don't know if I
almost
answered the question, but
it's almost an oxymoron because the way to become mentally tough is to become more vulnerable.
yeah.
So I just think that that's an interesting. I mean, mental toughness is such a key word in
Yeah.
performance psychology, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's a
Yeah. And yeah.
culmination of a whole bunch of different topics.
Exactly. That's how I say it. Like it's a term that encompasses so many like mental skills to then being mentally tough. So like, and you said it is a vulnerability. It's being able to like understand emotions, being able to understand what's going on with you, almost accept them or understand them and explore it to then be able to encounter it. So like I know, I think I heard in a recent podcast there's a thing of like it's not that like elite performers have no stress or no anxiety, like NO, but they actually like KNOY, a W, like know about it and how to handle it, which was like a cool way of putting it that I never thought of like the same word but spelled differently with two different meanings. Like they know with a K about stress and anxiety and how it impacts them to then be able to perform. It's not that they don't have any of it.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
That's what podcast was that on? Can I listen to it?
I think that was on the mastering your mindset one with Colin. I forgot his last name. I think it was on that one. I think it was his most recent one. And it was like the way it was said, like that was like the one that was like the line that stuck out with me of like, wow, like that's actually like a cool way of thinking of it. Because you always see like these elite, like high performers like do something, you're like, wow, like how are they not stressed and like or how are they not nervous? And it's like they probably were, but they've done enough exploration on themselves to be able to go and handle it and know what they need to do to overcome it. So it is like the like KNOW versus like the NO type of thing of stress, anxiety, and like a lot of different feelings that you could have.
That's really cool. And then when you see athletes being candid about their mental health or their mental skills, and they're being vulnerable on a national stage. So they may be talking to the media about it, or they may have written an article in the Players Tribune about what they were going through. There was a really good article by Asia Wilson, who plays in the WNBA, about her depression following an MVP season.
Yeah.
And I just thought that, I mean, these are men and women who are at the peak of their performance, and they're still
Mhm.
going through these issues. So what do you think when you see an athlete who's being so candid about what they've been through to the media?
Um, I'd say it shows like it takes a tremendous like as we'd almost say like mental toughness almost like not trying to use it lightly, but like you said like a vulnerability to express that like this is going on with me because like we put them on such high pedestals of like how can you be depressed or like upset when you're making money or like you're achieving all these things like you're famous, people know you, but like from the outside it looks great, but like we don't know what that's like for that person on the inside of like what's really going on, like what does that entail in their life. Like you don't know the things about like their privacy, like what they have to go through to like not be like in public and be like that's like an iconic figure, everything's being watched and scrutinized over and over, where for us like for typical people, like if you make a mistake like you're the only one in most cases that knows about it, where like someone can go and make a minor slip up of something and it is on every news platform, every social media thing for millions of people to see. So we just don't know like obviously if you work with them you can kind of get into that. So like for them to openly go and say I have this going on with me, knowing that it's going to be talked about, knowing it's some people are going to scrutinize it. Like look at like Dak Prescott of like saying he had depression and like people coming out and being like, how can you say that you're the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? Um, and like, how can you be depressed or like that can't be like the leader of America's team per se type of thing. Like it's just like you don't know what the reaction is. Like that takes like true bravery to like come out and admit it. And then you also see the other side of what are you listening to of people coming to a side and like that is opening the door to the conversation of like the importance of our mental health and our mindsets that we have. So it's kind of like, are you willing to put yourself out there knowing you're going to have those sides of people criticizing you, but also like it's going to in the long run hopefully have such a massive benefit for people that are going through those situations of like, hey, I'm going through the same thing and it's not so bad because look at this public figure who expressed I'm going through the same exact thing. So I think it takes like a true strength and bravery to say that about yourself and like openly come out with it.
Yeah, I think that I try to read every article and like watch every video when athletes are talking about their struggles, because I think that the second you allow yourself to verbalize what you're going through or what you've been through is the second that you start to heal from it.
Yeah,
And it may be a trauma, or it may just be something like stress, like prolonged stress that just went on for too long.
yeah, I agree with that.
So, is there anything else that you think that I missed asking about, or that you want to add? Anything that you want to plug? I mean, now that you're doing all of your sessions online, do you want me to like include your link in the bio of this, in the show notes of this episode?
Uh, I would say one like for like I think it's called Master Your Mindset. I know like their ending slogan that might be easier to find is like the body has limits, but the mind is limitless is like how they end their show. So like I know that that's like their ending one. So like if it is to try and find that podcast, that might be an easier way to like if you Google it or whatever,
Yeah.
find that one because I think that's the name of the podcast, but I can't fully remember if that is the actual name. So like that might be an easier way to find it.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Um, yeah, I think um the other thing is like I recently started like through like ATP where I'm at what we call like mental dive Monday. So like it's a hashtag that like the only videos so far like finding that name was because there's no hashtags of that on Instagram other than my like the videos that I've posted. So like they're posting those videos, those come out every Monday, which I encourage to watch. So it's just like quick minute videos of just going through different skills. So like the first one was just an introduction of like the importance of the mental side. The second video was I kind of broke down how people say all the time like it's just mental or like it's just a mindset and kind of how saying that just devalues the mental side of like you're saying oh it's just this and I kind of then in the caption say like that just is a justification for why you aren't accomplishing something um and
Love.
like if it's yeah so if it's like just mental then why are you allowing that to be the thing to stop you from performing if you can physically do it so kind of stuff like that and then the third video was on like doing something for the first time so different ways to go and like build confidence and from that so whether that's going from past experiences that like translate to that or what you say to yourself or asking people who have done it before so it's quick videos of stuff like that that I hope to continue to grow and make like awareness of the importance of mental skills, but also how it's stuff that like I kind of said in the first video, like it's something we do and interact with every day. I kind of just laid out a couple of things of like every day, like there's some form of motivation you go through, there's some form of confidence. You talk to yourself every day, you set goals, you have routines, like you visualize what you want future events to look like. Like it's stuff that isn't just for sports, it's for everything. So I try and normalize it essentially to like make it like this isn't just for athletes or this isn't just for someone who has something they might be going through, but everything in life. And then I also posted I recently made like a professional Instagram account per se. So it's like M Rieger Mental Performance. That I also
I
post
think
those
you
videos on.
followed me, so I have that. I have that account.
Yeah, so I wanted to like make it I didn't want to do it on like a personal Instagram account just from a like if you're working with clients type of thing of like them following and seeing like personal stuff or like the whole thing with confidentiality of like say you see a video and like they didn't tell you about it but it's on Instagram like can you really bring that up in a session so I wanted to avoid that and like not have any problems with it so I just made like a professional one in terms of it's only going to be mental performance skills videos or quotes and then that's also a place to follow athletes knowing that since I am online like I don't want an athlete to like follow my personal one and be like oh wow like what a jerk like Matt didn't follow me back or whatever and like you could potentially lose like interest because of that so I was like if I make like a professional one and follow them on that at least like there is that form of communication that's not as I don't want to say not as personal but like not as inside into like my own life where it's more helping them learn about different mental skills.
Right. And then one more time, like, is there anything else that you want to go over? I think that we talked extensively about everything that I wanted to talk about. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Um, I think, I guess one thing that I mentioned it to like we like each week we at ATP like we'll go to like a roundtable of like how we're doing and like kind of what we're seeing. And something that I found, I think a difference between like high school and professional athletes is like you see high school so much more outcome oriented and like comparison oriented, where like the professional guys like go and like there's so much more about what they're currently doing. Like if you ask them, like at least where I'm at, like how are you doing, they'll tell me like what set they're on, what exercise they're doing, and like how they're currently feeling in terms of like in the moment, like which is really cool. Where when you ask like a high schooler that, like it could be a range of topics of school to like not being like where they're at, which is an interesting thing. Like they're, oh, like I was throwing the other day and I was only hitting this, but like their arm felt great. And but they weren't seeing like velocity increases, but like they were going through a process working on technique and they got the technique of what they wanted, but the velocity didn't increase like they wanted. And it's like, well, at that moment you went and like technically did get better, you improved the process, but like maybe it's not the outcome you expected. So I think that's like an interesting thing that I want to keep monitoring my time, like in my time there, of like seeing, is that a consistent theme and like potentially something to either make a workshop on like in the future or like a presentation on, of like a way to introduce that to high school athletes, like try and get more of that process and like self comparison mindset rather than comparing it to like friends or like what the weight on the side of like the barbell says or kettlebell, and how they're, and focus on how they're doing, not what they're doing really.
Yeah, I think that so what you're saying is that high school athletes are more prone to comparing themselves to their teammates
Yeah.
versus professionals who are more keen on comparing themselves to their past self.
Yeah, like really, yeah, professional are definitely like, I know like what it takes type of thing to get there. I know like, hey, like what someone else is doing doesn't necessarily impact me, but like, or like that comparison thing of it. And they're really like into like what they need to get done to improve because they know that they have their own specific needs to improve upon. So it's stuff like that where with high school you kind of like see them a lot more, which I mean it makes sense. Like you're in high school, like, there's definitely like that ego of like wanting to go and like lift a lot of weight, and like everyone still has it at some extent, but you definitely see it more of, oh, like why are they doing that exercise and I'm not, or how much weight is like getting you pushed, or like I said, focusing on like a lot of numbers rather than like how they're actually getting that number in terms of like bat speed or exit velo or like how hard they're throwing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's probably something that you'll see consistent throughout.
Yeah.
And then, how do you pronounce your last name?
Rieger.
Rieger. Okay.
Yep.
And then I think that concludes our interview.
Awesome.
And then I will just email you or I'll DM you on Instagram once this is published, and then I'll tag you in it on our social media.
Yeah, awesome. And then yeah, I would obviously love to like put like potentially like a small clip on like mine or wherever
Yeah,
it is to like promote it and stuff like that.
yeah,
So
absolutely. I love cross promotion.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun to do.
I'm glad that you enjoyed. I hope that this conversation, I mean, I think that this is going to be a really cool episode. I'm excited
Yeah.
to get editing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.